A couple of weeks ago, I showed you this clip. And it was your guys' job to turn that clip into a build. Top comment gets to be featured in this particular video. And that top comment goes to Skylark Mott, who created a pretty awesome build. So we're gonna jump into it and share what they came up with. This video is brought to you by the Secret of Oki Island. The Secret of Oki Island is a solo adventure produced by Obvious Mimic, the same producer who created The Wolves of Langston and Crystals of Zaleth. The Secret of Oki Island puts you on a ship with some other scallywags on an adventure to find some secretive treasure. This plays a lot like a choose your own adventure, except built on the 5E system, so you're rolling skill checks, you need certain spells to do certain things, and you go on a grand adventure. I've had a blast playing the other two, and I'm looking forward to this third one. You can go ahead and join the Kickstarter. It's already hit its goal. It hit its goal today, so it's a pretty dang popular, so I hope you guys take advantage of all the stretch goals that you can get now, and you can find that link in the description down below. But with that, my friends, let's move back to the video. As for stats, they went Dex primary, Intelligence secondary, and Wisdom tertiary. We have to make sure that we have a 13 in Wisdom for later on in the build. We're going to start off as a variant human. We're going to take the Meta Magic Adept feat. We're going to take Transmute spell and Quicken spell as our two Meta Magic options. Our first 3 levels, we're going to be going into Bladesinger. Bladesinger is going to make us a major AC tank and is going to allow us to actually dodge and dip around and tank some. Because this build is so low in constitution, we are not a tank, and so that AC really needs to carry us, and we need to be really careful about our HP because it does not go far. On top of that, concentration could potentially be a problem. We're really relying on dodging attacks, so still keep in mind your positioning is important, and I actually think this fits the clip pretty well. She spends most of her time dodging and playing it defensive, and yes, she can do some cool melee stuff, but really she's trying to create distance when she's doing her melee stuff. She's not closing in with the enemies, she lets them close to her. As for spells, at level 1, we're going to be picking up Green Flame Blade, we're going to pick up Ice Knife, Shield, and Thunder Wave. These all fit the flavor of the build. That's largely elemental damage, and as we continue up, we're going to make sure to pick up Shadow Blade and Rhymes Binding Ice. Rhymes Binding Ice, of course, kind of near the end of the clip, she sprays out that ice and it stops all these enemies in their track before she finishes them. Rhymes Binding Ice is the perfect spell to represent that move that she does. Shadow Blade, of course, is the fact that she kind of creates some elemental weapons. Right now, we don't have an elemental weapon, so we're going to go with Shadow Blade to kind of represent that, but that'll be temporary, possibly. Our next 3 levels, we're going into Wildfire Druid. We're going to create our little wildfire moat as a moat of light. It's going to move around and help us have a lot of maneuverability. She shows that she can duck, dodge, do some cool tricks, and that is represented through this little wildfire guy who teleports you out of nasty situations. On top of just, throwing some extra fire to do a bit of elemental damage, she kind of has those motes of electricity behind her, so you can kind of flavor this fire spirit as one of those, just a fire version, possibly. But once we hit level 3 in Druid, we can pick up the Flame Blade spell. Now, I think this spell is generally terrible, so I would basically just try and say, hey, can we make this Shadow Blade but fire, meaning we reduce the damage, but we can actually use multi-attack, and your DM will probably roll with it. If they don't, just keep using Shadow Blade. It's honestly not a huge deal, but it's just a flavor thing, and fire damage is worse than the psychic damage that Shadow Blade does, so it's actually a nerf. But if your DM's a stickler, then okay, never mind. But if we can, for flavor purposes, let's go ahead and pick up a Fire Blade here. From here, we're going to be taking Bladesinger for the rest of our career. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the notes that Bladesinger can help us achieve in this build. So the first is that we can still dual wield as a Bladesinger. So if we want to pick up a secondary weapon, like a knife or whatever, then that allows us to do Booming Blade and Green Flame Blade, because technically you can't use Booming Blade or Green Flame Blade with a summoned weapon that isn't, it doesn't have a value cost to it. I think it's kind of silly, but if we're going straight raw, then carry a knife, so you can Booming Blade or Green Flame Blade as needed. Now, Skylark Mott had an idea to use contingency to set up a chain lightning, because of that moment where she's standing and the lightning courses behind her without her ever doing an action. It would be really cool that when the maximum number of enemies were within range of a chain lightning, the contingency would set it off and it would go blast them. Fits the flavor absolutely perfectly. Unfortunately, contingency only targets you, so it can't affect any other enemies. It only can affect you, so unfortunately we can't do that, as cool as it would be. Now, despite that, chain lightning is a really cool spell for that flavor, that moment. Now, after that electricity, she uses Rhyme's Binding Ice to freeze them all in place, and then after that, she uses either something like Fireball or Wall of Fire to go ahead and create this big blast of fire to really deal damage to those enemies who are all stuck in place. So we've managed to do her full combo there at the end. A note of this build is I think Warcaster is a massive deal with this build. Mostly for the concentration, but also because we've taken Booming Blade and Green Flame Blade and we want to be able to cast those cantrips as a reaction. And that is the build. I thought Skylark Mott did a really fantastic job of capturing pretty much every element of the clip into this build. So good job on them, and thank you for playing the game. But that is it for today's video. But with that, my friends, I hope you have yourselves an incredible day, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.